In this video, I really want to touch on this subject alone because I think it's a really important subject to actually talk about when it comes to video games and the video game industry. Of course, these are just my opinions, so keep that in mind as well. Everyone will have their own opinion on this topic. It definitely varies from person to person and things like this. But in this video, I actually want to talk about should ports and remakes of games be full price when they come out. So let's say a game from like 10 years ago gets remade today. Should that game be full price or not? Of course, in my opinion, I don't really have a direct opinion to give you. I think it goes off of a game-to-game basis, and I think a lot of people out there will agree it comes down to a game-to-game basis, and it comes down to the person itself. Have you played that game before, or have you not played that game before? So there's really no one answer. A lot of people are just going to give you a lot of different answers, but let's talk about the number one main answer. When it comes to the developer itself, I think the developer is okay with charging the full price of the game because they're probably basing it off of the fact that a lot of people haven't yet to play that game. So maybe you haven't bought that game yet, or maybe you're a person that's new to video games, and for whatever the case may be, you just haven't bought that game yet, and so they're okay with charging the full price of the game, which is maybe $60, because they know a lot of people will buy that game, and depending on how much you like that game as well, a lot of people will actually rebuy that game for the third, fourth, fifth time, so they will be willing to buy that game. And of course, with the Nintendo Switch, especially the Nintendo Switch itself, you guys know that's a hybrid system, and of course you can take that system on the go, so of course more people are likely to rebuy a game for the fourth, fifth time, depending on how much they like the game in the first place, just to play the game on the go. That's how crazy people are, and they will rebuy a game there. And do I blame the developers for charging $60 for games that are 10, 20, 30 years old when you can actually buy that same game on like decades old hardware that's much more cheaper? Let's look at Skyrim, for instance. Skyrim is a game that came out back in 2011, and then they pretty much ported it to all the current gen hardware. So if you have a Nintendo Switch, if you have a PS4, an Xbox One, you can actually rebuy that game. And when that game first came out to these platforms, of course, no substitutions, it was $60 no matter how you look at it, and you pretty much were forced to pay $60. But a lot of people just like that game so much they ended up rebuying that game for $60. And especially with the Switch, of course, being a hybrid system, of course a lot of people are going to rebuy that game for like the fifth time just to play that game on the go. So yeah, I really can't blame the developers there. But the funny thing is, with that game, if you're super desperate to buy that game and you still have old hardware laying around like a PS3 or an Xbox 360, you can literally go out and buy Skyrim right now for pennies. I'm talking pennies. I'm talking about $2 or $3. That's how dirt cheap that game is, because I guess for whatever reason it's just so old, it's been ported everywhere. Copies are just being given out on last gen hardware, PS3 and Xbox 360. So if you were so desperate to buy the game, you might as well buy it on last gen hardware if you still even have your last gen hardware. Also, we really do have the consumers to blame here when it comes to these ports and comes to these remakes actually being ported to these newer types of consoles, even though they're decades old games, because, well, there's a lot of people who will rebuy these games even if they played these games 100 times. So it's even a more incentive for a developer like Bethesda Studio to actually go out of their way to port Skyrim to all these current gen platforms and make probably millions more dollars for a game that people already played over 100 times. So we're to blame for that. If a lot of people weren't rebuying this game, developers would probably be like, there's no money to be made here. It all boils down to money too, because let's face it, a lot of these games aren't too hard to reskin or port over to the current gen hardware. You pretty much just have to update the graphics and update the engine to make sure it's playable on these newer based hardwares, that it makes it easy for companies to pretty much get a quick buck. I kind of think of these ports as kind of like lazy. Of course, it depends what game it is, but in general, something like Skyrim was just a lazy half-assed port or update of the game. And now let's talk about what really matters and how it depends on should these games be $60 or not. It really also boils down to what type of things are they doing with these games. Are they just strictly porting them to newer gen hardware, or are they actually updating the game in a meaningful way? When I mean meaningful way, I just don't mean HD remake or like just a bump in graphic fidelity. I actually mean adding new stuff to the game to make it feel fresh, to make it feel like you're actually buying a brand new game or buying it for a meaningful purpose, because a lot of times a lot of these games come out and they're strictly just ports of older games and they don't add anything. Sure, they may update the graphics, and for a lot of people updating the graphics of these older games may be enough for you to replay the game, but in my opinion it's kind of hard to justify buying a game for the third or fourth time if they're just going to add little elements like updating the graphics and maybe updating the controls. In my opinion, they should go out of their way to add new stuff to the game, maybe new DLC, maybe new characters, maybe just new story elements, maybe new things like that to give people who've already played the game a reason to rebuy the game. But I guess developers can be lazy on that point, because let's be honest here, a lot of the time, like I said, people are going to buy the game even if it's just strictly a port of the game, even if it's just an HD remake of the game that just updates the graphics and maybe updates the controls. A lot of people will rebuy the game. I get why people would want to rebuy the game as well, maybe because it does play better than what it originally played, but then also it's more convenient to play on a current gen piece of hardware instead of having to pull out your old gen piece of hardware like the last generation systems. Why would you want to have a lot of systems plugged in that just take up space, a lot of wiring, and a lot of times those consoles either are just too old, they don't work, or there's some kind of problem with your system. So of course you want to play on newer gen hardware, and especially since you have all your games on one box, like I said, it just makes more sense to have all your games on one box. So if you see a game that maybe you want to play, you'll rebuy the game just for the convenience of having it on that system. So basically what I'm saying is, in this video, there's no really concrete way to say yes, games are worth full price, games are not worth full price. Some people will tell you, yes, I'm okay paying $60 for a game that's decade years old or just a port of a game. Some people tell you no, it's not worth it if they're not adding anything meaningful to the game, and maybe you already played the game 100 times. What are your guys' take on this whole thing? Should games that are decade years old or games that are ports of other games be full price games? Should they actually give users who maybe played the game on last generation hardware maybe a discount to this game? Should these games actually come out and actually be like $40 to $50 instead of the full retail price of a brand new game that's coming out today, that's not a decade-year-old game, where you can actually buy that decade-year-old game? Like I said, a lot of these games could be bought for like $4 to $5, maybe even $10 because they're so old and they're on these platforms that are pretty much non-existent anymore. So it's very interesting to see everyone's opinions and takes on these games that are very dirt old and very dirt cheap, ports, remakes, whatever the case may be. In some circumstances, I say yes, make these games $60. There's enough value in these games. People are going to rebuy these games anyway, and especially, like I said, the Switch, of course, you got that portability, so of course people will be okay with paying full price. And you have to take in consideration as well the developer can get away with it. A lot of people never played this game in the first place, or they're brand new gamers who are getting into video games, so yes, of course they can get away with $60. It would be kind of cool for some people who want to play their games maybe with updated features, or maybe updated graphics, or maybe just play on a current gen piece of hardware. Maybe there's some way they can get a discount. I know it'd be too hard to give a discount out for games, because how would you be able to prove that you played the game in the first place? You may not even have your receipt anymore. You may not even have the actual game anymore. Maybe your system broke. So it would be very hard to prove that you would be able to get a discount on your game. I wish there was some way though, especially with a lot of those ports that were ported over from the Wii U to the Switch, that you would be able to get a discount on the games for adopters who bought in so many of the Wii U games, like me myself. I have bought in a lot of those games, and I could easily prove to Nintendo that I have bought in all those games, because when it comes to the Wii U, I was actually one person who actually bought all my games digital on the Wii U. So if Nintendo was allowed me to like sign into my old Wii U account, of course I can prove I bought in games like Mario Kart 8 for $60, then I can get a discount on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for like, let's say $40, and that would be fair since I'm buying the game for a second price. But they know us suckers will buy the game again for $60, and they'll be profiting on a game that they're releasing us for a second time. So yes, it's kind of lazy and cheap that companies are doing this, but I get why companies are doing this. What are your takes on this whole situation? Let me know in the comment section below. Anyway guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.